The Special Fathers Network is thrilled to be sponsored by Rubin Law, a multi-generational law firm dedicated exclusively to serving families raising children with special needs.
He agrees with everything. So you can't ask him yes or no questions. Edward, everything going okay? Yeah. Edward, is the sky green? Yeah. He'll just agree with you on everything. So you cannot ask him yes or no questions. But he's got such a wonderful soul, and learning about people with disabilities through my brother, and then meeting some of the other back then kids and now young and older adults has really, that's where it started.
That's our guest this week, Rob Johnson. Rob was an Emmy award-winning news anchor for years on CBS 2 Chicago and is an outspoken advocate for those with special needs. He also has a brother, Edward, who has Down syndrome. David Hirsch talked to Rob about his life experiences and lessons from growing up with a brother with special needs, and we'll hear that discussion on this Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. Here's our host, David Hirsch.
Hi, and thanks for listening to the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. I'd also like to offer my heartfelt thanks to the following donors who supported the 21 CD Ironman campaign, who each contributed $1,000 or more to help keep our programs free to all concerned. In alphabetical order, they are Len Batterson, Von Boxtaller, Anna and Greg Brown, the Canal Financial Group, Kim Duchessois, Chaz Edelstein, Chris and Christy Kazian, Bob Musikowski, the Peloton Dads Facebook group, Dick Reck, Kevin Richardson, and Tom Wake. Thanks for your generous support.
The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we'd be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad.
So let's listen now to this compelling conversation between Rob Johnson and David Hirsch.
I'm thrilled to be talking today with my friend Rob Johnson of Hinsdale, Illinois, who's a father, 7-time Emmy award-winning broadcast journalist, and outspoken advocate for those with disability, and especially those with Down syndrome. Rob, thank you for taking the time to do a podcast interview for the Special Fathers Network.
I am honored that you thought of me, David, and I just think this is going to be a tremendous time that we're going to spend together, and hopefully I'll have a few little nuggets of wisdom to share.
I'm sure you will. You and your wife, Stacy, have been married for 20 years and are the proud parents of a typical 15-year-old son who loves hockey. Your next younger brother, Edward, who is 48, has Down syndrome. Let's start with some background. Where did you grow up? Tell me something about your family.
Well, our family was anything but normal, right? Because we took the road less traveled. We didn't take it. It found us. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and I remember, Edward is 3.5 years younger than me. And I remember the first memory I had of him, I was sitting on the floor. And so my family all has, well, at the time I was little, but dark. Everybody's tall with dark hair. And here's this little guy with different looking eyes, the blondest hair you've ever seen. And my parents didn't cut his hair for a couple of years. So he had this long blonde flowing hair, and he's like a year or two old. And I just remember my 4-year-old mind thinking, like, what's going on with him? I had no idea. This is the early 70s. So this wasn't where we're teaching, equity and inclusion in schools, and everybody knows that you're supposed to treat all people with respect. This was the 70s where you didn't talk about it, or you hit them at home, or you did whatever. And my mom and dad, for whatever reason, the strength and determination that they showed at that time, having no resources. There was no Gigi's Playhouse where you could go and meet other moms and dads with kids that had Down syndrome. This was our life. He's your brother. You're going to love him. We're going everywhere, and we're going to be, they didn't say advocates then, but that's what they wanted us to do. And then my youngest brother, Andrew, came along, and we all grow up, get a little bit older. And by this time, we'd moved from St. Louis to Brussels, Belgium. And my dad worked for Emerson Electric out of St. Louis. So we were civilians. And the international school was about 60% American, but 60 different nationalities. So you could walk down the hallway and hear 6 or 8 different languages in 30 seconds, which was kind of cool. But anyway, my dad was on the board of trustees at the international school. And one of our dearest friends, Bob Ader, who was the superintendent at one point, said, we need to have Edward come to the international school. So my brother Edward is Down syndrome. And he went to a Belgian special education school the first 2 years and so he had to learn a different language. I mean, you want to talk about a high bar? That is a high bar. But he did learn the language as best he could. But then he came to the international school, thanks to Bob Ader's vision. And my brother was the first special education student there. And by the time we left in 3 or 4 years after that, Edward was one of 10 special education students. So the international school really beefed up its special education program. And I am honored to say that there were numerous, special education program was in the elementary school. This was a 75-acre campus. So the middle school, high school, and elementary school were segregated by distance. There was a huge campus. And so my brother Andrew's in the elementary school, so is Edward, but there were 4th and 5th graders for year after year that would give up their lunch hour to go work with the special education kids. And fast forward 30 years, and I can think of 4 or 5 of them that made special education their vocation. They're special education teachers. They've devoted their lives to what I think is one of the noblest, most important causes out there, education in general, but also teaching those in the special education realm. And that's what they did. I'm just so proud that that's the legacy that Edward left. And the great thing was, me and my friends kind of ran the high school. And then my youngest brother, Andrew, he was pretty big for his age. So he and his friends kind of ran the elementary school, and we set the tone for Edward. And it was, you're going to love him. You're going to respect him. And he was like a celebrity on campus. People would be like, oh, there's Edward. Hey, how you doing, buddy? And so we had a cocoon for him for 2 or 3 years that the special education program was going on while I was still there. That I think was probably the highlight of his life. No question.
Well, thanks for sharing. It's not lost on me that your parents picked up and left for Belgium, right? With 3 relatively young boys, and including a child in the middle with special needs. So that tells you something about your parents' character as well. And
that's when they said, we're going to go everywhere. I mean, we went all over the world. We traveled all over the world, literally. And they were like, listen, people are going to stare. That's their problem. It's not ours. So we went everywhere. We took them everywhere. And it wasn't, it made us a more loving family, having someone that's so sweet and so generous. And I just think it made us a much better family.
That's fabulous. You were pioneers, no doubt about it. So let's talk about your dad, whose name I understand is Don Johnson.
Back in the 80s, that was really funny because everybody's thinking about Don Johnson that wore all the pastels on Miami Vice and, the old show. So, yeah, that we got a big kick out of that, 30 something years ago.
Part of his 15 minutes of fame, if you will.
All right.
He worked for Emerson Electric in Brussels, and I understand that he worked for Stevens Inc. in Little Rock, and he's still working in his 70s. What's he doing now?
Yeah, my dad is, first of all, he's one of the smartest guys I know. And any big decision I ever made in my life, you can be sure I asked my dad. He got a CPA, then he got his law degree. Then he went to work Price Waterhouse in St. Louis, then to Emerson Electric. His business background was tremendous. Went and got the international business experience in Brussels, as you pointed out, running the European operations for 6 years there. And then he came to Stevens Inc. in Little Rock, Arkansas. My family's from the South, so they relocated there after we lived in Belgium. I know that not a lot of people do that. Hey, straight from Brussels, we're going to Little Rock. But they did, and he worked there for several years. And for years, the project he's been working on, it's basically Google Law. It's called Legal, and that's what he's doing. He is 76 years old, and he loves to golf. My mom does too. And, they're trying, during COVID, they've been trying to be responsible and that sort of thing, but they're still living their lives. And they're just such great role models. And my dad's always been a great role model. And like I said, not only do I love him, but I trust his instincts as a father and his instincts as a businessman.
If there was one important takeaway when you think about your dad, a lesson learned, what might it be?
I just think he taught all of us, there's no shortcuts. There's no excuses. If things aren't going your way, you work harder. And if you're going to be lazy, you have no chance. He always kept me grounded. And I knew that at some point in my life, all the intensity that I spent on all the other things that I did were going to be pretty singularly focused on the academic side. And sure enough, about halfway through college, it really clicked with me when I realized I'm not going to play sports, for a living, and I need to really buckle down. And so that's when I really got it, the lessons he'd been teaching me my whole life. And that's when we really got along at our best, when I bought into that and understood that, listen, my only path to success is making sure I get good grades and making sure I maximize my opportunities and then go work harder than everybody else. And he taught me all those things.
So let's switch gears. You went to school, high school, as it turns out, in Brussels, at the International School of Brussels. And then from there, you went to DePauw University in Greencastle, Indiana. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you went straight into your career in broadcasting. And I'll just give a brief flyby. I don't know if I'll get it all right or in the right order. But KATV, KALB from 1990 to 92 in Little Rock. KLFY in Lafayette, Louisiana, 92 to 94. KPNC TV in Houston, 95 to 98.
KPRC, yeah.
WLS here in Chicago from 98 to 06. And then more recently, CBS here in Chicago from 06 to 19. And then since, you've started your own company, Johnson Communications Consulting Firm. And along the way, you picked up 7 Emmy Awards. Pretty impressive.
Thank you.
So from what I remember, you met Stacy in Houston, and you've been married for 20 years. And I'm wondering, is there an interesting backstory about that?
Well, so when I moved to Houston, I was there, and then she had just gotten out of school, and she was a production assistant there. And the thing that I remembered about her, aside from being absolutely gorgeous and having great energy that everybody sort of responded to, was that everybody wanted to work with her, because she was a hard worker. She put herself through school and went to the University of Houston and worked 3 jobs and just showed this great determination and pluck. And I was always so impressed with that. So aside from the, aesthetic things, the things that make you attracted to somebody, I was also attracted to the fact that she was such a hard worker and she wasn't taking shortcuts and she was doing all the little things. So anyway, that's how we got to know each other. But then the station wasn't paying her any money because she was, kind of entry level. And so she goes into advertising. But we still hung around the same group of people and had, whatever. And then one time it's like, hey, we should go out. And she's like, yeah, with, the group of, 20 or whatever. I was like, no, we should go out. And that's how it started. And we started dating. And then I got the job offer in Chicago and we weren't engaged or anything. And it was like, man, this thing's going great. We should just kind of see where it goes. And she's like, if this doesn't work out, you got to move me back. You got to get me, and make sure I got an apartment and all the stuff to set you back up. I'm like, that's a fair deal. Absolutely. And the first time Stacy ever saw snow, it was the blizzard on January 2nd, 1999. That's the first time she ever saw snow. And it was 21 inches of snow. And she's making snow angels in the, near in the tiny yard in our condo. And she's telling her dad, like, I don't think I'm going to make it up here. And I was like, honey, it doesn't snow 21 inches every time. And so fortunately for her, it didn't. But that was her introduction to snow, a blizzard. And then her husband's, going wall to wall coverage of the blizzard of 99. I was working, 15, 20 hour days and wasn't seeing her for a while. So she was kind of on her own, but it worked out. We got engaged and then got married in 2000.
That's awesome. I love this story. And it's like Murphy's Law, right? If you've never seen snow before, you're not going to see a little dusting. You're going to see, a massive blizzard. And, if you could live through that, right? If she got battle tested through the first snowstorm, that's fabulous.
No question about that.
Let's switch gears and talk about special needs first on a personal level and then beyond. Besides Edward, who was 4 years younger, did you have any experience or connections with special needs, either early on or perhaps as a young adult?
Well, Edward was my introduction to it. And then based on the peer group he had or the school that he went to or the other kids he was around. So I was around other children with disabilities because I was around my brother and because he was around them. So that was my introduction to other people that were not my brother who had disabilities. And it's the same thing. And everybody's disabilities are different. His is intellectual. Some have physical. He lives at a 10-bed facility, an Easter Seals facility called Butler Apartments in Little Rock, Arkansas right now. And it's they're very highly quarantined right now. And so Edward has not been able to hug my family. My mom and dad, they live 10 minutes away. He used to come home every other week and they haven't been able to hug him or anything since March because of the pandemic. They can see him in the parking lot or they can deliver him, a piece of cake or a, Diet Coke or the things that he likes, but they can't spend time with him. And I know it's been very hard on them, but I miss him for sure. I talk to him on occasion on the phone. He agrees with everything, so you can't ask him yes or no questions. Edward, everything going okay? Yeah. Edward, is the sky green? Yeah. He'll just agree with you on everything. So you cannot ask him yes or no questions. But he's got such a wonderful soul and learning about people with disabilities through my brother and then meeting some of the other back then kids and now young and older adults is really that's where it started. For me, it started with realizing that I had a voice here in Chicago and writing an op-ed piece in the Tribune. And then next thing I know, people are asking me to come talk about my brother and people with disabilities. And it started being a pretty regular thing, and different groups and more groups would ask me to be supportive of their cause. And I was, because I understood what it meant to have a brother with a disability and how much it blessed our family. And I just wanted to give people determination and hope and swagger. And it's a tough go. So that morphed into, about the R word, people using the R words so hatefully and hurtfully to talk about people like my brother, and trying to change attitudes about that and have people push back and say, well, I didn't mean it that way, or that word isn't offensive. And I'm like, no. I'm telling you, as the brother of somebody who has a disability, somebody that I love dearly, it's offensive. So this has taken sort of a circuitous journey here in terms of, advocating for people with disabilities, trying to do away with, the use of the R word, joining the Special Olympics Illinois board. It's all very important work. And the greatest thing for me was, for years, I would talk about my brother. And I would say, Edward, he lives in Little Rock. My mom and dad live there. And I think all these charities that I would MC their event or support them in some sort of way, he was this mythical character. And then back in 2018, at the 50th anniversary of Special Olympics, they had the big gala that I was hosting. And I had my mom, my dad, my brother Edward, my brother Andrew couldn't make it in, sadly, because he's been on the journey with us the whole time too. He should have been there. And my son Jaden and my wife Stacy, we all got on stage together. Everybody got to see Edward. I'm like, this is the guy I've been talking about. And then the entire night, all these Special Olympians would come over and, Edward, oh man, like they knew him because I talked about him for so long and so much. And I was so happy. And then my mom and dad were there. And aside from not having Andy there, because he should have been there, It was my dad said to me afterwards, this is one of the greatest nights for our family, because my family was up on stage with me. I introduced everybody. We've all been on the journey together, and they all took the literal and figurative bow. And I think it meant so much to my parents, because they're the ones that set the tone for all those years. And they're the ones that gave me confidence, and my brother Andrew confidence, and my wife and my son confidence to, say, hey, we love Edward, and we're not going to let people not respect him. He's going to be respected like all of them.
Yeah, well, I love the story. I love the way that you talk so lovingly about your brother, about the family, the solidarity that exists on Edward's behalf, and the, compassion that you have that emanates, that, says this is more about inclusion and acceptance to the broader community. And at the risk of focusing on the negative, because I know you're an outspoken advocate for people with disabilities, what were the challenges when you were growing up? If you're talking now to those who are siblings of somebody with special needs and they're growing up, what were some of the real issues that you had to deal with when you were that age?
Well, I think when you're a teenager or when you're a young person and you're worried about what your friends think, people, and I think the biggest thing was, and I told you in my high school years, all my friends were people that loved Edward. And so they told everybody, they showed everybody the way with me. Here it is. Like I said, it was a cocoon. He was protected. He was loved. He was respected, and everybody followed in line. And then Andrew, my youngest brother's in the elementary school, preaching the same thing with all of his friends. And we just were able to set the tone. And after I moved back to college and my family moved to Little Rock, Arkansas, and he went to a regular high school without any protector there, I cringe to think about the disrespect that he may have had to endure, although I never knew about it. I don't think I wanted to know about it because we were able to control his environment so well. So what I would tell people who are siblings of those with disabilities is, first of all, I hope the parents set the tone. Listen, we're going to love him or her like anybody else, even though they're different, and stay tight with your family. Get your friends involved. Get them to know your brother or sister with a disability, and get them to know that they are to be respected and loved like anybody else. And don't make it abnormal. Don't make it like, oh, there's somebody that's not like me. Hey, we're going to embrace the differences. And so I know it's easy for me to sit here now as a grown man and say this, but this is what we preached back when I was in high school. And I will tell you, there's one story, and I like telling the story because it makes you realize not everybody is on board. It was my senior year. It was during a basketball game, and we were the varsity boys, so we were playing last. And so I think I might have been in my uniform, but sitting in the stands with Edward and my other friend, Clark, who lived with us. He was 6'5", and I'm 6'2". And there was a 14-year-old boy from the other school that walked by us, and Edward might have been kissing us or giving us a hug or this. And I don't know if I can say the words on the podcast because we're in decent company here, but he basically called us demeaning names, my brother and Clark and me. And we're like, excuse me? And he said it again. And he called Edward a mongoloid, that's what he called us. And then he called Edward that. And we were like, what? And I do not advocate violence. I try to use my brain and my language and my, better senses. But we took that guy down the hallway where nobody could be, and we threw him against a locker a little bit and roughed him up. And like, if we ever see you look at him the wrong way or anybody like that, or say this again, this is going to be much worse. This kid was terrified. And I hope to God, I don't even know his name. It's from a different school, younger kid. I hope that was the sort of eye opener he needed to understand that, listen, Edward's he taught us love in ways that we wouldn't have known it with a quote unquote normal family, because we did hug and kiss. And that's what our family does, because he's so loving. And so many of the children and adults with Down syndrome are like that. And it's just beautiful. And it was this kid's problem, not mine. And so Clark and I had an attitude adjustment with him. That was the one kid that was stupid enough to try that in front of us. And then he repeated it in front of us. We're like, what? Are you kidding me?
Well, what I heard you say, Rob, was that your mammalian brain took over. And
darn right it did.
Nobody got hurt, but hopefully, like you said, it was a lesson learned. It's a poignant story about the experiences that you've had, or an experience that you had with your brother, and it speaks strongly to your character and the way you were raised, and the relationship that you have. So thanks again for sharing.
Oh, sure.
So let's switch gears and think about the advocacy you've been doing beyond your own family. You wrote a book entitled Timothy Trainor, Head in the Game, which came out in 2015, about a young hockey player who gets a concussion. And what's the outcome? What motivated you to write the book? What type of feedback have you received about the book?
So Jaden, my son, has played hockey for years. When he was 6, he got a concussion playing hockey. And I know it's hard to believe 6, 7, and 8-year-olds are playing, and a kid lined him up from yards away. And you could see there's video of it, and just knocked his head off almost. And he got a concussion when he was 6. And to watch my son struggle, to not let him be able to play his video games or to watch TV or to read or to do the basic things because he had a concussion, it was very humbling. And we were we're parents anyway, we're going to be protective, Stacy and me, but it was a real eye-opener. And so that was our first experience with the concussion thing. And then as he became a more devoted player, and I realized this thing wasn't, just a phase, that he was going to play this. This is his 9th or 10th year playing right now. He's a 15-year-old. I realized if I'm going to feel good about letting him play this rough sport, then I need to be doing good for other people. I need to be educating people, and I need to be an advocate for concussion awareness. So I thought, why don't I write a book loosely based on Jaden? Timothy Trainor's a 10-year-old. Jaden was 6 when it happened to him. But Timothy Trainor gets a concussion from a dirty hit. He has to miss school. He has to sit out. He doesn't understand. He thinks he's being punished. These are all lessons that Jaden had to learn and things that we went through with him. So it's a little bit autobiographical, and there are characters in the book that I was thinking about 10-year-old Jaden playing with and against. And so I thought I'd write a book. I was trying to reach the 7 to 12-year-olds and have them take concussion awareness seriously. And to me, it was a great way to teach kids about the books. So it was a labor of love for sure. And I'm glad that I did it. And it's funny. I just did a Zoom today with a young adult who's at this place called Gateway to Learning. He's a 22-year-old young man with a disability. And they emailed me and said, he's read Timothy Trainor, Head in the Game, like 20 times. And so I sent him 3 more, like 2 signed copies. I sent him more. And today I was on a Zoom call with him. So it's funny you're bringing up the book, because just today I found the biggest fan of the book. So now he has new copies that he can plow through time and time again. So my biggest fan of Timothy Trainor, I was on a Zoom call with.
Thank you so much for sharing and putting yourself out there. I'm sure that you probably drew some criticism, not only praise, but some criticism, either known or unknown.
Right. Who does he think he is? This or that. I'm like, I'm a guy whose young son got a concussion, whose son is getting dinged every time he's playing 15U hockey now, and they're just trying to rip each other's heads off every play. And how do I let him do that? Well, I let him do that because I know he loves it, and I'm not going to get in the way of his passion. And I'm also going to try to make people aware of this issue and how important it is. And I would just say this, I don't want to belabor this too much, but for parents out there that think, oh, it's concussions, it doesn't apply to me. If you have a child that's active, you have a cheerleader, you have a soccer, basketball player, it's not football and hockey, it's anything. If you have an active child, this is probably one of the top healthcare issues you should be thinking about, because your child can do headers in soccer a bunch, or think about basketball and you're fighting for a rebound under the net and you get an elbow to the head, whatever. It could be anything. You're the cheerleader on top of the pyramid and you fall. It could be anybody. So what I always try to tell people, you don't think it's going to come for you, and then it does.
I can relate. I think we had talked about this before. My middle daughter, Emily, in her senior year in high school, had a concussion playing hockey and then playing lacrosse, and she got taken out, and that was not the way she expected to spend her senior year. And it's just the right thing to do. You fear for their future, right? Because I think we're learning a lot more about concussions and the human brain and the longer term implications of not paying attention to these issues. So again, thank you for your advocacy. It's well needed.
Well, sure. Well, I just want to, I've been on the board of Concussion Legacy Foundation based out of Boston. They're the ones that have the brain bank, so athletes pledge their brains. So that's been tremendous work that I think, we are raising awareness. And what I want to tell everybody about is when you hear somebody from Concussion Legacy Foundation, casting a critical eye on football or some of these other pretty contact sports, we're not trying to do away with sports. We're trying to make them safer. So when somebody says kids under 14 shouldn't be playing tackle football because their brains are still developing, that's not do away with football. It's think about the way you want your child to play that sport and get the most out of it. So we just had our fundraiser last week. It was virtual, and that was one of the points. Malcolm Gladwell, the author, was the keynote speaker, and that's one of the points he drove home. We're not trying to do away with sports because we know there's such value, especially during a pandemic time when people aren't able to do what they love. We know there's so much value in it for kids. We're just trying to make sure they do everything as safely and responsibly as possible.
Yeah, well, thank you again for sharing. In addition to Special Olympics and the Concussion Legacy Foundation, one of the other programs that I know that you're enthusiastic about is something called Hockey on Your Block. And I'm wondering what's your involvement and what does that organization do?
Yeah, so I was on the board of that for a couple of years, and then I was on another board similar that does the same work called Inner City Education Program. And basically what these two programs do is they listen, hockey's my favorite sport. It is not the most popular sport in America. It's not even close. And one of the reasons it's not popular is because it's very expensive to play. It's expensive to get ice time. It's expensive to get coaching and equipment. And it's not like you can go play basketball. You can't go pick up a basketball, put a pair of shoes on and go play. So it is because of the expense, there are a lot of people that can't play it. And so some of these organizations have endeavored to give kids in the inner city, kids that may have trouble with transportation to the ice rink or the coaching or paying for equipment or the ice time, the ability to play the game. Because my belief is if it's going to be I think it's the greatest sport around, but to truly be the greatest sport around, everybody needs the opportunity to play it.
Yeah, well, from one hockey dad to another, thanks for your involvement. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up, Rob?
I just want to say what a great opportunity it is. Thank you for letting me talk about my family. I hope there was, like I said when we started, I hope there were a few nuggets of wisdom that were useful. And I would just say, as a brother of someone with a disability, just be mindful of other people's journeys and be mindful of, what they might, you don't know what somebody else's journey is like. So I just ask people to be mindful. When you see somebody that doesn't look like you, they're not going to harm you. They're not going to hurt you. Why don't you get to know them? Why don't you get, if you see them at the grocery store bagging groceries or wherever it is, just show them the respect and treat them the way you'd want to be treated. I know that's very simple, but it's worth repeating, I think. Thanks again. Let's give a special shout out to our mutual friend, Larry Kaufman, for making the introduction. Oh, Larry is terrific. I always had a good network of people when I was in the TV business. And as I've transitioned to consulting with Rob Johnson Communications, Larry's one of the people I've reached out to, and we were connected in the network. He's such a giver. He's always thinking about people that he can put in contact with one another. And that's how we got to know each other, through Larry. So he is like the ultimate connector, wrote the book, The NCG Factor, about networking, and is really just such a giving and such a positive energy guy and such a wonderful connector. So I'm grateful that he introduced us.
If somebody wants to learn more about your book, Timothy Trainor, Head in the Game, the Concussion Legacy Foundation, or just to contact you, what would be the best way to do that?
So the best way to contact me is my email address is Rob Johnson, all one word, at rj47llc.com, rj47llc.com, Rob Johnson at rj47llc.com. Send me an email, anything you want to know about any of the above, I'm happy to do it. And RJ47 LLC, the reason it's 47 is because that was Papa's racing number when he raced cars back in the 60s. So I forgot to mention that. So there's always little things weaved in here, CYB and 47, and they all have meaning to me.
Yeah, well, we'll be sure to include that in the show notes so it'll make it as easy as possible for people to follow up.
Thanks.
Rob, thank you again for your time and many insights. As a reminder, Rob is just one of the individuals who's part of the Special Fathers Network, a mentoring program for fathers raising a child with special needs. If you'd like to be a mentor father or are seeking advice from a mentor father with a similar situation to your own, please go to 21stcenturydads.org. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. As you probably know, the 21st Century Dads Foundation is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, which means we need your help to keep our content free to all concerned. Would you please consider making a tax-deductible donation? I would really appreciate your support. Would you please also share the podcast and post a review on iTunes to help us build our audience? Also remember to subscribe so you'll get a reminder when each new episode is produced. Rob, thanks again.
Thank you, David. Thanks for all you do, and thanks for being an advocate as well. And it's been an honor spending some time with you.
And thank you for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, presented by the Special Fathers Network. The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for fathers to support fathers. Go to 21stcenturydads.org. That's 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we would be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad. Also, please be sure to register for the Special Fathers Network bi-weekly Zoom calls held on the first and third Tuesdays of every month. Lastly, we're always looking to share interesting stories. If you'd like to share your story or know of a compelling story, please send an email to david@21stcenturydads.org.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen. The Dad to Dad podcast was produced by Couch Audio for the Special Fathers Network. Thanks again to Reuben Law for supporting the Dad to Dad podcast. Call Reuben Law at 847-279-7999 and mention the Special Fathers Network for a free consultation. 847-279-7999.